Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel, again with a Compaq Presario desktop PC. Now this is the Compaq Presario 5441. It's kind of the big brother compared to the previous computer that I showed you from Compaq. Now this 5441 on the right here was released 1 or 2 years later than this 4540 that I already featured on this channel. And it's a slightly bigger model. It also has this funky Compaq look and feel. A bunch of different shades of gray, brown, and beige here. We have the Compaq Presario logo, hard drive LED, power button. And what really stands out here is this little belly here at the bottom, which is, typically from these Compaq Presarios. We have a serial number and a Windows 98 sticker. And in the late 1990s, Compaq was one of those brands that attempted to stand out both with the form factor and the case design. So let's move to the back. We have a pretty traditional I/O panel here. We have keyboard, mouse, USB, serial port, parallel port, a VGA connector, so we have built-in VGA, we have audio input, output, speaker, and a joystick port. In terms of expansion, it seems we have one single expansion card here, which appears to be an Ethernet card. There is room for some other expansion, so we'll see what we have when we open her up. We have a very small power supply, it seems. Don't think this is a standard form factor. Typically you would see your power supply here somewhere at the top, but Compaq decided to put it here on the side. So let's open up the case and see how everything is arranged inside. It's a little bit fiddling to get the case off, but finally we are in. And as you can see, it is pretty cramped. We have the power supply here, so everything is covered, so you don't really get to see a lot of the internals. We see a hard drive and disk drive. We see the expansion card. We can pull the plastic front cover off very gently by removing these little clips here, and then the whole thing just comes off, making it look like a more traditional PC. But this is a fairly small form factor, so everything is crammed in. We have a second hard drive, it seems. We have this drive. We have the power button here, optical drive. And yeah, pretty cramped in here. So let's see what we have. Now this is a Compaq machine, so that means torque screws. So I'm first going to get the Ethernet card out. Now this is a Compaq Intel Ethernet card. Pretty standard PCI 100 megabit Ethernet card. I'm going to start by removing the power cables and the IDE and floppy drive cables just to get a clearer view on things. As you can see, there are lots of different screws here, so somebody definitely went in here and replaced some stuff, because normally they work with these torque screws, but here we have quite a bunch of different screws. There is a drive bay area here for the disk drive and the hard drive, so I'm just going to take this off to get a better view of the motherboard. So undoing a couple of screws, and normally this should come out, but then I noticed there was still a screw here on the front, so yeah. So after removing that screw, hopefully we will get this drive bay out, and indeed we do. So it just slides on out with the Seagate hard drive and the 1.44 megabyte disk drive. Hard drive is a 4.3 gigabyte model. Going to remove the power supply cable here, which appears to be standard ATX, although the power supply itself isn't a standard ATX format. We also have a cable here which is routed from the front for the power cable and some LEDs, so we're going to be removing those. And that should mean that there are no more cables attached to the motherboard, and we can attempt to remove the motherboard from the case. And to do that, we need to look at the back of the case, and there are a couple of screws here that we need to undo, and then we should be able to pull down this bracket here where the motherboard is attached and just slide it on down, and here we have the motherboard. So pretty standard motherboard. Here we still have the CD-ROM audio cable. We have the CPU cooler here, which is firmly attached to the CPU. I wasn't able to get the CPU cooler off, so I had to take off both the cooler and the CPU in one go. So yeah, definitely some kind of thermal paste or sticker which has kind of glued these two together. So I'm going to gently try and peel it off. But yeah, I already know here that it will require some deep cleaning to get the CPU in a proper state. So yeah, just using isopropyl alcohol is definitely not enough. I tried different ways using like a coffee filter, using isopropyl alcohol, using some wipes. But after some scrubbing, everything came off nicely and we can get a clear view on this AMD K6-2 45 MHz CPU. So this is a micro ATX motherboard with a socket 7 CPU. Now, for these socket 7 or super socket 7 platforms, you don't see these ATX style motherboards all that often because normally they are associated with AT style motherboards where they kind of prolonged the life of your AT based computer, but they are very common in these kind of Compaq and Packard Bell configuration more often than not as kind of a low cost office solution. Now this is a Gigabyte GA5SMM motherboard, Gigabyte being a fairly good motherboard manufacturer, but don't get your hopes up here because this is definitely low budget as we will see later on. Now we do have some expansion options, 2 ISA slots and 3 PCI slots, 1 PCI and ISA slot shared. We have 3 SD RAM DIMM module sockets, so we have 3 sticks of RAM here, 120 megabyte each. We have sound on board with this ESS Solo 1, which is a pretty decent card both for Windows and MS-DOS, so that's a plus. We have the SIS chipset, the 5595 Southbridge, a popular chipset from ICS supporting socket 7 SD RAM and paired together with the SIS 530 Northbridge here underneath this heatsink. And this might sound familiar because a while back I reviewed this Packard Bell computer which also had an AMD K6-2, an ESS Solo 1, and the very same SIS 5595 Southbridge with the SIS 530 Sinbad Northbridge. So very similar systems, budget office PC stuff. The BIOS is provided by Award, which seems like a good thing at first, but when you enter the BIOS you will see that it has been completely and utterly stripped down. There are very few options to tweak. Even the standard CMOS settings don't allow you to configure stuff like hard drives. Everything is like auto config. Very few options here. If we go, for example, into the integrated peripherals, where you normally expect to see lots of stuff, the only thing you can configure here is the parallel port mode. So yeah, you're not going to be doing a lot of tweaking in this BIOS, let me tell you. We have a coin cell that still seems to work after 20 odd years, so that's really good. Here we have the socket 7 CPU socket, so AMD K6-2 socket 7 platform or super socket 7 with the AMD K6-2 450 megahertz, really interesting CPU, budget CPU compared to the Pentium 2, but pretty powerful and pretty popular in the retro community, running at 2.2 volts core, 3.3 volts I/O from 1998. And I'm not really sure why, but I've always had a thing for these AMD CPUs. The fact that they can compete with the likes of Intel is just really amazing, and it's a real testament to the engineering that went on in AMD around that time period. We have a standard socket 7 cooler, so heatsink plus active fan, needs a bit of a cleaning. The motherboard and CPU is configured using these dip switches. There are two switch blocks. One of them provides you the option to configure the CPU ratio and the CPU voltage. So this one here is set to 2.2 volts. We have another switch block which is meant to set the actual bus speed. So this one here is set to 100 megahertz, which is the maximum bus speed that this motherboard supports. We have onboard floppy drive and IDE controller, obviously. We have a standard ATX power supply connector here. So although the power supply itself isn't your standard form factor, the connector is, luckily. But you're not going to be replacing the power supply in this system very soon due to the form factor. The chip that you see here is the second level cache, or L2 cache. So this is 512 kilobytes of cache. There are a couple of chips here on the motherboard that went unpopulated, these SDRAM 50 chips. So these were actually meant for the onboard video adapter. The SIS 530 chipset provides us with an onboard AGP 2D and quote-unquote 3D accelerator. So obviously the video card or the video chip needs a memory. And in this particular model, the video gets its memory from the main memory, but it can also have its dedicated set of memory, but in this case it's not populated. So the capacitors on the motherboard seem to be in pretty good shape, and I didn't have any issues running this PC. So the overall quality of the motherboard is quite good. And what I noticed after I took everything apart is that you can kind of take this power supply unit, you can slide it more to the center, and then it kind of, tilts its way upwards so that you can get a better view of the motherboard. And there's also a fan on the other side that's kind of meant to provide some airflow in the case. So yeah, pretty nifty design. So here you can see it from another angle. You just slide it like this and then pop it on out like so, and you get a good view of the motherboard. Storage is provided by this Seagate 4.3 gigabyte hard drive, a fairly decent hard drive. This one comes with this kind of rubbery thing, which is probably meant to keep the acoustics down of the hard drive. You have the traditional jumpers here to set the various modes. So yeah, pretty decent hard drive for a machine like this. Now there was an optical drive included with a PC, and it's even labeled Compaq, but it is in fact an LG32 speed CD-ROM drive manufactured in October of 1999. So this was a PC that was, probably assembled around the end of 1999, beginning of the year 2000. So it was already using kind of outdated parts at that time, making it, your typical budget PC at the time. So I had to replace this optical drive with another one. I also took a peek at this hard drive here. Seems to be, let me check. So this is a Maxtor drive. Seems to include Windows 2000, works perfectly. And it also has a marking here that it kind of makes a little noise. Also a 4.2 gig hard drive. So we'll probably see later on what's on this drive here. Because despite the fact that there was a pretty clean Windows 98 installed on this machine, it did give some problems here in Device Manager. The secondary IDE controller had an issue. I wasn't able to see that second hard drive. I also wasn't able to see the optical drive. Sound card wasn't installed. So yeah, this will need to be properly reinstalled and reconfigured. So I haven't decided yet what my plans are with this machine. I think I'm going to be running some benchmarks and probably going to reinstall it to its, factory default using the Compaq Restore CD. That's one of the advantages of PCs like this, that it's fairly easy to find these restore CDs and just, kind of get that new experience just as you would have bought this in 1999. Took a look at the crazy software which was installed, not only the bloatware, but the kind of funky Compaq tools and diagnostics that you had. Like the built-in technician that came with this Compaq Presario internet PC. But that's it for now for this first look at the Compaq Presario 5441. Will probably be a follow-up video fairly soon with some additional benchmarking results and just seeing how the machine overall performs and what kind of software this came with out of the box. So I hope to see you guys very soon for that video. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, giving it a thumbs up, commenting. Everything that will help out the channel is very much appreciated, and I hope to see you guys very, very soon. Bye bye.